Okay, so today we are going to start a topic which is sex determination that falls under your core paper 12, and that is unit 4. Now you had learned molecular biology when you were in first semester, but after that you people have become a bit detached from that subject. So what I thought was, before getting into genetics, I do a very brief recapitulation of what that basic central dogma procedure was, because the sex determination part of Drosophila actually involves a lot of background knowledge that you had already studied during first semester. So we are moving on to our topic for the day, that is sex determination, and the references that I've taken are from Russell, Klug and Cummings, Benjamin Peir's Concept of Genetics. There's another book, because the first slide that I'm going to show in my talk, there is another book, I have not written it here. It's Human Molecular Genetics by Strachan and Reed. So now let's come into this picture. When we think of molecular biology, or when we think of automatically the word central dogma comes into our mind. Now, you had gone through the different mechanisms that are operative within this terminology known as central dogma. So, if we remember central dogma, there was this replication part, and then there was a translation as transcription machinery, and then there was a translation machinery. In replication, a DNA is copied to another DNA. So from a mother, a daughter is produced, and with the help of the DNA polymerases and other sets of enzymes acting therein. It is an autocatalytic process, because from a it's a deoxyribonucleotide molecule, another deoxyribonucleotide molecule is produced. When we move down the line, from DNA to RNA, it was the initial hypothesis that was provided by Crick, that the flow of information is unidirectional, and when it was initially postulated, the flow of information is unidirectional and an RNA is produced from a DNA. But later on, with the discovery of the enzyme reverse transcriptase, it has been observed that DNA can be made from an RNA. So we'll not get into that. Let's restrict ourselves to that information, where an RNA is being made from DNA. This mechanism is known as transcription. This is a heterocatalytic process, because from deoxyribonucleotide molecules, we are getting ribonucleotide molecules. This machinery is known as, or the mechanism, molecular mechanism is known as transcription. And again, there are a group of enzymes operative in it. In case of prokaryotes, it is much simple. In case of eukaryotes, a bit complex. But again, there is a group of enzymes, the RNA polymerase, and a host of factors known as transcription factors. Okay. So, if we come into this portion of the thing, so when we think of a transcription unit, now let me just recapitulate what I had taught you in first sem in the initial classes. What is a gene? A gene is a stretch of DNA which is able to produce a biological product. This stretch of DNA, when produces a biological product in the form of a protein, these stretches of DNA are known as structural genes. But if the stretch of DNA is producing a product in form of rRNA, ribosomal RNA, or tRNA, then these stretches of DNA are usually known as functional gene. So here what we are seeing, the transcription unit that has been described here is basically that of a structural gene. Now, this is a transcription unit. So the transcription unit has a promoter element to recognize this is a recognition site for the polymerase, And once the polymerase recognizes, it then actually binds with the template DNA with, based on which, based on the information of this template DNA, it will be making the RNA. So it binds to the template DNA. Just keep in mind there are two DNA strands, one in the 5' 3' orientation and other in the 3' 5' orientation. So this is an anti-parallel bidirectional double-stranded DNA. Okay. So when the polymerase identifies the promoter and takes this as a template strand, just notice that it sits on the 3' end of the DNA. So it selects this strand, the purple one, okay, and it identifies the promoter, sits on the strand, binds with the strand. This mechanisms, we are not getting to the details of the mechanism because we don't need the details also. This is just a recapitulation. The details had been done with you in first semester. And then the polymerase starts to transcribe. So the purple strand is the template strand, or otherwise known as the antisense strand. And the blue strand, which is the complementary DNA strand, is known as the sense strand. Why is it called the sense strand? Because since the RNA is being copied based on the information present in this purple one, it is actually a replica of the bases present in the blue one. So this is known as the sense strand. In fact, the RNA is an exact carbon copy of this blue strand, except for the areas where thymine is being replaced with uracil. So this is a transcription unit, and once the transcription is done, we get a primary transcript. If you remember, the primary transcript has stretches of coding areas and stretches of non-coding areas. What does it mean? Coding areas, so the exon means that these sequences will further be identified by the translation machinery and decoded to produce a product. So these areas are actually identified by the translation machinery and will be converted into the form of a string of amino acids, which is known as a polypeptide. But the intervening areas, these are non-coding areas. Why non-coding? Because there is no corresponding string of amino acids will be made with respect to these areas. So when the primary transcript comes out, what happens? There is a splicing machinery, and through this splicing mechanism, we get a mature mRNA where very efficiently the intervening spaces are removed and we get a fully formed mature mRNA which contains only the coding sections or the segments juxtaposed with each other. So they are placed in tandem or in adjacent manner with each other with no intervening spaces. Now, this mature mRNA, it moves into the cytoplasm. So till this part, we are having it in the nucleus. Now this mature mRNA moves into the cytoplasm. In fact, if you remember, apart from the splicing machinery, there were, in case of eukaryotic system, there were two different processing mechanisms that took place. One was the addition of the methyl caps at the 5' end, and the second was the addition of the poly A tails, adenine molecules at the 3' end. So this matured, processed, mature mRNA will now move into the cytoplasm, where in the cytoplasm, what it will do, it will move into the cytoplasm where it will be recognized by the translation machinery. That is again a big molecular mechanism operative within the cytoplasm. And finally, this mRNA will again be translated to produce a precursor polypeptide. The precursor polypeptide is then converted to the mature polypeptide with the cleavage of the N-terminal methionine. If you remember, that was the first amino acid that is to be added because AUG is the universal start codon for an mRNA. So this is what you had done this detailed mechanism already in first semester. For this particular topic which we will be studying is the Drosophila sex determination and sex determination in man. Specifically for the case of Drosophila sex determination, this area is important. If you remember this area, since we are having 1, 2, 3 exons. And in this figure, as you can see, all the 3 exons have been spliced to give us a mature mRNA. But there is a phenomenon known as alternative splicing. What is that phenomenon? Even though I'll be explaining it in details while dealing with Drosophila, but with this picture, if we had an RNA which consisted of only the 1 and the 2 segment, or the 2 and the 3 segments, that is, the mature RNA will not contain all the 3 segments. There are 3 coding regions or 3 exons, as you can see. But it is the combination of the different exons that is actually making 3 different products from these 3 sets. So the combinations can be 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3. So this way. So we are having 3 exons, and in sets of 2, we are making small mature mRNAs. So that is basically the concept of alternative splicing, which we will study in details, that how Drosophila uses its advantage to differentiate between the sex determination cascade in male and the sex determination cascade in female. This is a very conceptual picture. I have given this conceptual picture because you will be studying, you have pedigree and you have chi-square in your practical syllabus, and you have, as far as I guess, the Drosophila identification of chromosomes or something like that in your practical syllabus. So this is basically a structure of a chromosome. Now, we have studied from, I think so, class 8 or 9, that the chromosome has a centromere and there is a long arm and there is a short arm. So just remember, the short arm is known as P. P comes from the word petite, P-E-T-I-T-E. So the short arm is known as petite or P, and the long arm is known as Q. Each arm of the chromosome can be divided, as you can see. So we have an arm. Each arm of the chromosome can be divided into regions. How are they divided? We start from the centromere and walk down towards the ends. So when we start with the P arm, we start walking from the centromere. So this is 1, this is 2 for this picture. For the Q arm, we start walking down from the centromere towards the apex. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3. Again, each region can be divided into bands. Same logic. So we start walking down from the centromere, and we have, for region 1, we have 5 bands here. So this is a very brief summary about how the chromosome looks. Now coming to the model which we will be studying. Just a second. It's not moving. Okay. Now, this is the model. This is a very famous model, and this is a very established model to study genetics. Because this particular fly gives us a very big advantage. If we look into the life cycle, you can see it's 0 hour, and 2 hours develops, 5 to 8 hours, 10 hours, 1 day. So within a day we are getting the larval stages, and then the larval stages grows for 3 days, and you all are aware of the fact that the Drosophila larva has this salivary gland where we can observe the polygene chromosomes. They are basically huge in size and are a very good set of chromosomes that can be observed under microscope. So we have, within 3 days we are having the larva, and within 5 days the adult is emerging. Since the lifespan is so short. So genetic crosses can be very easily, very easily, they can be done with this kind of flies, where within a week I'm getting to see, I'm getting to observe what is happening. So this is one of the advantages of choosing this animal as a universal model for studying various kind of underlying genetic mechanisms. What happened? Okay. Now, coming to further advantages, if we look small size, as I said, a generation time of 10 days, each female lays 400 to 500 eggs, easy to culture in the laboratory, very small genome, I'll come to that part, large chromosomes, as I said, the salivary gland has this huge polygyny chromosome, and many mutations are available. So they are a beautiful model for studying various mechanisms of genetics. And I showed you the life cycle. The life cycle can be seen very easily, and it completes within a very small amount of time. And this is the male fly with a slender abdomen, and this is the female fly with a broader abdomen. So, yeah, and if you can see the spot at the end of the female fly is woolly. If you look at the taxonomy status, basically it belongs to the phylum Arthropoda. It is insect. Size, it is 2 to 3 millimeter in length. If you look into the anatomy, it has 3 body segments: head, we have the head, abdomen, and the thorax. We have, if you can see, there are 3 pairs of legs, and there is 1 pair of wings. Now, it feeds and reproduces on fruit. If you at home, if you keep banana for some days, you'll be able to see this flies, excuse me, excuse me, flies coming and sitting on the banana. And now let us look into its genome. So if we look into the chromosomes, it has 3 pairs of autosomes. So chromosome number 3, chromosome number 2, and chromosome number 4, that is the shortest one. So it has 3 pairs of autosomes, and X and Y, that is chromosome 1, which is known as the sex chromosome. Amount of DNA is 175 million base pairs. Number of genes present 14,000. Humans have a number of genes from in the range 25,000 to 30,000. So you can see, even though we are much higher up in the phylogeny, but it is only that we are only 15,000 genes ahead of Drosophila. If they are having 14,000, we have it around the range 25,000 to 30,000. Percentage of genes in common with humans, approximately 50%. Average gene size 3000 base pairs. Genome sequenced in the year 2000. Now let us look into his contribution into the genetics. As I said, this is a beautiful model to study the various underlying principles of genetics. So basics principles of heredity, including the sex-linked inheritance. In fact, we will be studying sex determination, the concept of multiple alleles, the concept of epistasis, gene mapping. You have both all these things in your syllabus: epistasis, gene mapping. So we will be again and again revisiting this model. Mutation research, obviously, it played a huge role in the various analysis of the various mutations. Chromosome variation and behavior, GD-MAM will deal with the mutation research and chromosome variation, and then I think so there you will observe that this model also had to play a very big role, because there is a mutation known as bar mutation. I'm not getting into the details of that, but that is an interesting mutation. Then it played a big role in population genetics. Then it also played a big role in control of pattern formation, that is developmental biology. How the proteins are patterned, how they are developing, how the genes are interacting with one another, how the genes are differentially expressing in a particular part of the body and somewhat in a different manner in another part of the body. So genetic control of pattern formation and behavioral genetics. This is a lovely model to study behavioral genetics because the mating of Drosophila is it's very interesting to observe. There is a mating dance and it's a very interesting phenomenon. So this model, when we think of genetics, there are 2 to 3 models which deserve special mention. Another model is C. elegans, but this model, this is a universal model of choice, very easy to grow, and has contributed hugely to the field of genetics, to the field of classical genetics, to the field of developmental biology, and is still going on contributing. Now, coming to the chromosomal part, as you can see, there are 3 sets of autosome and 1 set of sex chromosome. Now, in case of sex determination, there are 2 to 3 kinds of methodologies by which the sex of a species is determined. If we humans consider sex determination, then we will think that all those who have a Y chromosome are males, while all those who do not have a Y chromosome are females, because X chromosome is common to both male and female, but Y is specific for male. So it is the presence or the absence of the Y chromosome that actually tells us whether that individual will be a male or female in case of humans. But when we move to lower forms, that is not usually the case. There are a variety of strategies, variety of modalities in which sex can be determined. So some sex determining systems I have mentioned out here. The first is the XXXO. So the female has 2X, the male has 1X. Next comes the XXXY system, which we follow. The females have 2X, the males have a Y. The Y is actually the determining factor. Then there is the ZZZW mechanism, where the females, these are found in lower arthropods, ZW, and the males ZZ. Then we have the genic sex determination, where there is no distinct sex chromosome. Sex is determined by genes on undifferentiated chromosomes. This can happen in a lot of Piesian population fishes. Environmental sex determination, very important. Some sex is determined by environmental factors. This has been seen also in a lot of fishes. Depending on the environment, or in flies also, depending on certain environment, the sex is determined. Now, if we come to the component of sex determination in Drosophila. Now, what is the basis of sex determination in Drosophila? It is the ratio of the X chromosome present in the sex chromosome and the ratio of the number of chromosomes present in a set of autosomes. So, let me explain. In this particular fly, there is 1X, and in this particular fly, in the 3rd chromosome, there are 2 sets of autosomes. So, the ratio will be X by AA. If these 2 autosomes are said as A, and this is 1X present in the sex chromosome, so the ratio becomes X is to the sets of autosomes 2. So there is 1X, we write in the numerator X, divided by, how many autosomes are there? 2, AA. So X by AA. So there is 1X chromosome divided by 2 autosomes, 1 by 2, that is 0.5. So when we have a 0.5 ratio, that is male. So we are having 1X chromosome and 2 autosomes, 2 sets in a autosomal system, and so it's 0.5. But had this been a female fly, then what we would have seen, that there is a X and there is another X. Okay. So 2X, XX divided by 2 autosomes, AA. So that is 1. So there, sorry, not 1. 2x, that is 2 in the numerator, divided by 2 in the denominator. 2 by 2 is equal to 1. So when we have 1, that is a female. So the sexual type is female. So that is how the basic mechanism of sex determination is done in Drosophila. It is the ratio of X is to A which actually delineates whether the fly will be a female fly or whether the fly will be a male fly. Now, there are a little varieties that has been observed in case of this ratio. At times, if the ratio of X is to A starts increasing from 1, above 1, greater than 1, we get variety categories of females. C is 1.5, 1.5, 1.3. So whenever the ratio calculation becomes more than 1, it is usually a female phenotype but not a normal female phenotype, because certain abnormalities has come in this genotype, in this genome, as a result of which we are getting these abnormal ratios. So whenever there is an increase in the ratio, we have a higher value, then it is usually a aberrant female. So it's a meta female for 1.5, 1.5 and a meta female for 1.3. But if the ratio lies between 0.5 to 1, the value is lying between 0.5 to 1, what we get? We get a meta male. Sorry. We get an intersex. Okay. So if the value is lying between 0.5 to 1, it's lying within this range, the category we get is the intersex. It has been shown here that how do we get this variety of ratios. So these are the abnormalities. When you have an extra autosome, that is an abnormality. When you do not have 1x, that is also an abnormality. So when the value lies between 1 to 0.5, it is an intersex. And if the value falls below 0.5, then the value is or that of a meta female. So right now I'll stop here because I hardly have only 2 minutes left. So I'll stop here right now.